Serbo-Croatian. That's a new journey that I'm on, a new road trip. I'm relearning my native tongue. But I don't want to talk about that tonight. I want to talk about a different journey I took 16 years ago. It's not a road trip, it's a hiking trip. So, like a lot of people who came to Athens, UGA brought me here about 2 decades ago. And while I was here, I met a guy. Spoiler, he's here in the room with us. And I eventually badgered him into proposing to me. It took a while, right, James?
A little bit.
We were going to get married in the fall, but that summer before, we decided to go to church one day. And I'm not here to witness to you, we're not doing that. But John the Baptist is one of my favorite characters from the Bible. So I really like that this was the icebreaker. We're talking about characters. You know, he lived in the wilderness. He followed his calling. He ate locusts. You know, like, it's just kind of a crazy guy, but like he was doing the Lord's work, right? And I just really enjoyed him. And so we happened to go to church one day, and the pastor was talking about John the Baptist. And as pastors tend to do, it was really boring. So I stopped paying attention. And instead I went into my brain, which is really interesting to me. And I daydreamed about the time that I went on a section hike of the Appalachian Trail the year before. And, you know, I was just thinking about being John the Baptist. Like, I wasn't eating locusts, I was eating Snickers. I wasn't yelling at people, I was hitchhiking. But the one thing I was doing that John the Baptist did was I was following my calling. Like, it was something I felt I had to do, just kind of like the fish in your story. You had to do it. So that's where I was in my head. And as I'm going through that, an idea came to mind. And I was like, I should talk to James about this after church. So we go to lunch after church, like you do in the South. You got to go to lunch after church, right? And I said, So next year, you're going to be writing your dissertation. That sounds kind of boring. I don't want to distract you. So what I'm going to do, I think, if you're okay with it, is I think I'm going to go try to hike the Appalachian Trail. And being James, he didn't really respond too much. He didn't say no, to which that meant yes to me. And so I started planning. Now, what is the Appalachian Trail? The Appalachian Trail is a 2,200-mile footpath. There's one end that starts at Springer Mountain in Georgia, and another end that's in Maine at Mount Katahdin. People section hike it. They hike like a larger portion of it. They go on day hikes. They go on weekend hikes. And some people are crazy enough to hike from one end to the other in a year. And so that's what I decided to do. When I set out in 2009, only about 20% of the hikers were females. And I'm happy to report that in the 16 years since, that number has doubled. Now about 40% of through hikers are females, which is great. I love the progress. And another little fun piece of trivia is last year, the new speed record was set on the Appalachian Trail by a lady named Tara Dower. She did it in 40 days.
Oh, wow.
18 hours and 5 minutes.
Oh, my goodness.
So there's been a lot of progress there, which is great. Anyway, you can imagine the reception I got when I was like, so I'm going to get married in November. I'm going to leave my husband at home, and I'm going to go hike in March, right? People thought I was crazy. And I wouldn't disagree. Like, it was a little crazy, but it came to pass. There was one beautiful day in early November. We got married. There was birds flying overhead. And then on a cold, rainy, dreary, freezing cold day in March, I headed out to Amicalola Falls State Park. A group of friends decided to come with us, with me. Not us, I'm not that crazy. For the first 30 miles, just to kind of warm me up to it. And we all rode together to Amicalola Falls State Park. I'll never forget, like, looking out the window and being like, I think I'm crazy. And watching the mountains get taller and being like, I think I'm crazy. And listening to the rain pelt the windshield and be like, yeah, I think I'm crazy. And watching the raindrops go up the windshield and be like, oh, I think I'm crazy. But I did it anyway. I went to Amicalola Falls State Park, signed in as a through hiker. My sister came to see me off. She gave me a hug. She took some pictures, and off we went. Except for we didn't, because we couldn't find the trailhead. I'm like, this is a bad omen. You can't even find the trailhead for the start of this 2,200 miles hike. But we found it, and eventually we got going. We hiked for hours and hours in the cold and the rain. It was 8 miles, and it took hours. I set up my little tent. It was a one-person tent. It was raining. I got in my tent, I got in my sleeping bag, and I was shivering. I'm cold all the time, but I was really cold. I couldn't stop chattering. And finally, I kind of broke, and I said, "Hey, boss," to my buddy who was with me. He was in a different tent. He said, what you need? I said, "Hey, do you have room in your tent?" And he said, "For what?" And I said, "For me." And he was like, "Okay." And he let me in. And so then I was the third person in a 2-person tent. And I slowly warmed up. The next morning I would realize I didn't close the valve on my sleeping pad, and so it completely deflated, and I was sleeping on the freezing cold ground, which is why I was cold. You live and you learn, right? Anyway, so we woke up, and it was not sun streaming through the tent. There were not birds singing happily in the trees. It was cold, and it was raining. And it continued to be cold and rainy for days and days. But we hiked across Blood Mountain down into Neal's Gap. We spent the night in a hotel. I warmed up, I took a shower, dried out my gear, all that good kind of stuff. And then my friends were ready to drop me off on the trail and send me north on my own. So at that point, I was alone on the trail, a female. And it was great. I met another female who was out there alone by herself. And we met other people, and we became part of this famous trail community that's just a beautiful community. We hiked to the Smokies where we saw so many black bears. We hitchhiked into Gatlinburg because there were tornado warnings. We're like, maybe we should be in the woods with tornado warnings. We hiked across a blizzard on Max Patch Bald. We almost got blown off. And then the next morning we woke up to 18 inches of snow. And we cut 21 miles through the snow to get to Hot Springs, North Carolina, where we stayed in a hotel, of course. We made it all the way to Grayson Highland State Park, and there were wild ponies we got to pet. And then I made it to a sign that said, New York City, 18 miles that way. And I just stood there befuddled, like, how did I made it from Georgia to New York City, 18 miles away? We made it across all the rocks in Pennsylvania. We hiked across the green rolling mountains of Vermont. I cried my way through the White Mountains in New Hampshire, because those mountains are tough hiking. It's really hard. And we made it to the rugged beauty of southern Maine. It was gorgeous. They had common loons, just a beautiful, beautiful bird. And then we made it to about 10 miles from the end, where I got my first glimpse of Mount Katahdin. I had thought about this mountain for years, and I got this first glimpse of Mount Katahdin. It was gorgeous. And my husband was there to hike the last 5 miles with me. He's still here today. And I did that all without eating any locusts. And I just want to leave you with a couple pieces of trail wisdom that I learned along the way. One is no rain, no pain, no main. The other is one that I had to chant to myself frequently, which is never quit on a rainy day. And the last one, which is the most poignant, I think you can apply it to anything in life, is hike your own hike.
Yeah.